Hi everyone, my name is Esme Mes and I work as an advisor researcher on freshwater availability at Deltares, one of the partners in the Stars for Water project. And in this webinar, I will display the water allocation model we built for the Rhine Basin using the water allocation tool RIBASIM. If you want to know more about the RIBASIM tool itself, you can watch the RIBASIM introduction video made by my colleague Fatima Moji. So what are we learning today? Well, I hope that at the end of this webinar, you have gained insights into the RIBASIM model for the Rhine, ranging from what the specific model looked like, which is also known as its network, also how you can use it, and also to what type of results it can generate. And additionally, I want to provide insights on the development of future scenarios for the Rhine Basin and the still tentative results of the model, displaying the water resources allocation and use within the Rhine Basin, specifically during situations of low flow and water scarcity. The webinar is therefore useful for anyone who wants to use RIBASIM for their own analysis, anyone wanting to gain better understanding of issues around water resources allocation and use in the Rhine Basin, and then specifically in periods of low flow and water scarcity, and anyone who wants to assess measures to mitigate the identified water shortages in the basin. So you can think about water managers, water researchers, and policymakers, and then especially in the field of mitigating low flows. And I really hope you can benefit from this webinar. So within Stars for Water, we want to improve the understanding of climate change impacts on water resources availability to support decision-making on water resources management. And we do so for 7 river basin hubs. You can see them in the blue blocks down here below, of which the Rhine Basin is one. And the key stakeholders for the Rhine Basin within the Stars for Water project are the 3 Rhine commissions. You can see them on the bottom here. And the first is the CHR, whose focus is on developing hydrologic scientific knowledge, with the ICPR, focusing on sustainable development and good water quality, and the CCNR, which focuses on navigation of the Rhine. And the 3 Rhine commissions, they indicated the need to have a better understanding of the impact of growing water use in the Rhine Basin on the Rhine River discharges, and then specifically in 2050, but also under prevailing uncertainties of socio-economic changes and climate change. And this way they can really make better informed decisions about the sustainable use and resilient water allocation in the Rhine Basin and also its sub-basins. So to enable this, we co-designed with these 3 Rhine commissions 3 possible future Rhine scenarios. And these scenarios are based on a plausible range of climate change and efforts of the Rhine countries to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but also plausible socio-economic developments. And to determine the effect of these 3 future scenarios on the Rhine discharge, an appropriate model and tool was needed. And that is why the RIBASIM Rhine model was developed. So before I dive deeper into the model itself, I shortly want to explain how the scenario analysis for the Rhine model works. So you can see on this picture on the left here that the foundation for the RIBASIM modeling tool is the historical discharge data and the existing data of a base year, through which you can model a so-called reference situation. And the reference situation for the Rhine model is a 90-year synthetical time series, which was generated based on a historical climate data time series from 1991 until 2020. It is also, however, possible to do scenario analysis, which is presented by the 4 blocks in the middle. And scenario analysis represents situations with adapted water supply, demand, and management due to either climate change or socioeconomic changes. And more specifically for scenario analysis, you can adapt the supply side. So you can think about hydrometeorological data, which can change due to climate change. For example, you can increase or decrease the discharge, but also the amount of precipitation and evaporation. You can adapt the demand side, so the volume of water required for irrigation, for domestic and industrial water demand. And this can increase or decrease due to factors such as population growth or economic growth, or possibly specific policy transformations. And then lastly, you also have the option to adapt the management side, so measures and interventions taken. For example, you can change reservoir management and volume when more low flow situations are, for example, occurring. Specifically at the Rhine RIBASIM model, there are 3 climate scenarios and 3 newly set up future scenarios for the Rhine, which underlie the modeling results. And the 3 climate scenarios used in the model are the new scenarios of the Dutch Meteorological Office. And the precipitation, evaporation, and discharge data differs for each of these scenarios, resulting in different water shortages when these are implemented in the RIBASIM Rhine model. So you can see here in the table the LD 2050 scenario, and it represents changes until 2050 when there's low CO2 emissions, so using the low emission IPCC scenario of RCP 2.6, and it's combined with a drying climate, meaning there's solely an increase of periods of drought, with a slight compared to the reference situation. And then we also have HD 2050, which represents the changes until 2050 when there are high CO2 emissions. So they use the RCP 8.5 emission scenario, also combined with a drying climate, which means there's a high increase of periods of droughts compared to the reference situation. And then there's the middle scenario, the MD 2050, and that's in the middle range of the previously 2 mentioned scenarios. And then we also have 3 newly set up Rhine narratives shown in the right table, and 4 characteristics of it are displayed in here. So in the first row, you can see the sustainable community scenario. And the focus of this scenario is on environmental protection and the development of a sustainable society. So green energy is the norm, and communities prioritize local and global environmental initiatives. So you have significant reductions in carbon emissions and preservation of natural resources. Then you also have the Rhine middle of the road scenario, and that one depicts a world with moderate economic and population growth, and fossil fuels do continue to play a significant role in the energy mix, but the transitions to renewable energy sources is slow. And efforts to reduce carbon emissions are often hindered by economic and political challenges. And then lastly, we have the economic growth scenario, and national security and economic growth are the primary drivers of policy and development. There's intensive agriculture and industrial activities which dominate the national economy, leading to significant advancements in technology and infrastructure. But yeah, that comes at the expense of environmental sustainability, unfortunately. The RIBASIM Rhine model is specifically developed in RIBASIM 8, which is a modeling tool available to download as a compressed file. And on the picture here, I unpacked it and renamed it to Rhine model. So RIBASIM 8 is based on a folder structure containing the modeling network and input data. And when the model is run, also the output data is added in this folder structure. So when wanting to build a model yourself, you can add or adjust the data in the folders. But also, what is really great about RIBASIM 8 is that it makes use of a graphical user interface. You can directly adjust specific input data and parameter settings in there, which makes it easier to use if you have little experience with RIBASIM yet. So on the screen now, you can here see the network for the Rhine Basin displayed in this graphical user interface of RIBASIM 8. And the network is visible through the tab at the bottom called Network Design here. And you can see that in our model, the Rhine Basin consists of different types of nodes. And the nodes can, for example, represent infrastructure such as reservoirs. It can also represent water demands for industry, domestic, and agricultural use in a specific subbasin, or it can represent inflow or outflow points. Yeah, so underlying also what's important is underlying the networks are 8 subbasins. You can see them here. And each subbasin has one water demand node put in for irrigation, domestic, and industrial use, because the water demand has been summarized for one specific subbasin. If you click on a node in the network, you can see the input data for that node, and you can adjust its input data through the graphical interface. So here, for example, I clicked on the domestic node for the subbasin Mittelrhein. And here in the gray panel under the map, you can see the different input data for that node per category, or tab. So you can see the general data or the management data or the explicit demand data once you click on it. There are 6 versions for the RIBASIM Rhine model, modeling different cases, which can be seen on the left here. And each of these versions uses a slightly different but similar network as the one displayed on the screen here. The network of versions 2, 3, and 4 is the same and is the improved network compared to the original RIBASIM Rhine model version 1 in here. And the network of version 5, which is displayed on the screen, and also version 6 is slightly different, as in this version more connections are made within the network, making the water better available to the whole sub-basin and hence making it more realistic. And although the network between the 6 versions is very similar, they mainly differ in which links and nodes are activated or which input data is used. So for example, one version contains historical data for the validation of the model, whilst another includes solely the changes from climate and does not include socio-economic changes yet. And here I want to focus on the version Rhine model 5 here, which contains the data of the 3 climate scenarios and 3 socio-economic scenarios I just discussed. And the climate and socio-economic scenarios are combined in 4 different cases. And first is the reference scenario. Second is the scenario of here, the low climate change and combined with low socio-economic changes. Then the scenario of medium climate change, which is combined with medium socio-economic changes. And then lastly, the scenario of high climate change, which is combined with high socio-economic changes. And this is to give a bandwidth of the impacts. And during this presentation, I will sometimes refer to the most extreme scenario. And herein I mean the scenario in which high climate change is combined with the highest socio-economic changes. Then about the results of the model. These are computed on a 10-day interval. So within the graphical interface, you can view the results in the tab Graphs. Here's it. Through the data viewer, indicated by the orange box here. And you have to click on the model version on the case of which you want to see the results. You can see it here. And choose the same model version in the data viewer. So for example, here I want to see the results of the case with high climate change scenario and socio-economic change in the version Rhine model 5. You can see it here gray. I selected this one on the left. So this means I also have to select the type of node under the same version of the Rhine model 5 in the data viewer on the right. So I now chose to look at the results of the public water supply node. And then I have to specify of which nodes I specifically want to see the results. So I can do that here. And then I still have to choose a parameter at the bottom to display in the graph and the table. You can see here I chose to display the water shortage, which is the amount of water lacking in the system to meet the water demands. And you can choose between many result parameters, which vary per type of node. And these parameters are all related to the water balance, such as water supply from network, the water consumption, gross and net water demand, return flow storage, water shortages, and more. So based on the setup cases in the Rhine model, several outputs were generated, displaying the potential impact of climate and socio-economic changes within the Rhine basin. It is, however, important to note that there are several assumptions underlying these results. And the first assumption is that the water demand for each sub-basin can only be extracted from surface water, so groundwater extractions are not considered. Also, in the model, the first priority is given to cover the domestic water demand, and then hereafter the demand for industry is prioritized, and lastly, when there's still water available, the irrigation water demand is covered. So the industrial water demand herein also includes cooling water. And also, the results solely look at the area and also hence the sub-basins upstream of Lobit. So it really excludes the Dutch part of the Rhine basin. And there's an assumption also revolving the return flow, which is the water not used and flowing back into the river system. And the return flows are assumed to be 97% for irrigation, 75% for domestic water use, and 90% for industrial water use. And the modeling assumptions will also be described in the later to be published report. So it is also important to state here that the results I present are tentative. Changes can still occur and they can differ from the ones that are still to be in the published report. Then on to the tentative results. So the first graph I show here displays the net water available within a subbasin to satisfy the sectorial water demands for each scenario. It not yet includes the socio-economic changes, it really solely includes climate changes. And with net values, I mean that the inflow of a downstream subbasin is subtracted from the upstream inflows. And the box plots here show a general decline in water availability as climate change scenarios become more extreme. You can see that here. And also the Mosul or Sahar subbasin and the Hochrein subbasin, these two have the highest net water availability, as is also the case in the reference period. In the Rhine model, three main types of water demand are considered, which are the domestic, industrial, and irrigated agricultural water demand. And the top three figures here, they show the spatial distribution of these water demands for the reference scenario, whilst the lower three figures here show it for the more extreme global growth and high climate change scenario. So please be very mindful when interpreting these figures that their units differ. So a direct comparison between the sectors is not recommended to be made. And the high scenario projects significant changes in water demand due to economic growth and climate change impacts. And the maps show increased water demand in several sectors, particularly in areas with high economic activity. And comparing the two rows, you can observe that there are shifts in water demand patterns, with some subbasins experiencing them more pronounced than others. So for example, here it's a very dark, very big change. And this reflects the influence of socio-economic development and climate changes on the water resource distribution. Then on to the last tentative results, revolving water shortage. So the box plot here on the left, it illustrates the distribution of water shortages per sector in the current situation and across the three future scenarios for the total area upstream of Lobit. And it shows that the water shortages increase significantly, especially in the industrial and irrigation sector, under more extreme climate scenarios. And as climate change intensifies, these sectors face greater challenges in meeting their water demands due to the reduced availability and increased competition for resources. And the household sector does not show any shortages because it has the highest water allocation priority. And then here on the right, the graph illustrates the water demand, water supply, and the resulting water shortage for each subbasin under the most extreme global growth and high climate change scenario, and also for the most extreme dry year within that subbasin. So this figure really illustrates the highest possible water shortage occurring for each subbasin, and it displays that water demand shortages will grow under the most extreme combined climate change and socio-economic scenario. So in summary, we built a water allocation model for the Rhine Basin, in which we used RIBASIM version 8 to gain a better understanding of the impact of growing water use in the Rhine Basin on the Rhine discharges, mainly in 2050, under uncertainties of socio-economic changes and climate change. And this enables stakeholders, especially our three Rhine commissions, to make better informed decisions about sustainable use and resilient water allocation of the Rhine River and its tributaries. And besides this summary, what is furthermore important to take away from this seminar? So RIBASIM, it's a water allocation tool, and we used it to model the water use and allocation in the 8 Rhine subbasins. There's 3 climate change and 3 socioeconomic scenarios, which have been co-developed with the key stakeholders in the Rhine, and these have been used as the foundation to run the Rhine RIBASIM model, altering accordingly the water supply and demand regimes. And these here are the climate change scenarios, and here the 3 socioeconomic scenarios. And yeah, overall, the Rhine RIBASIM model displays that there's a general decline in water availability as climate scenarios become more extreme. Significant changes in water demand occur due to economic growth and climate change impacts. And increased water demand mainly occurs in areas with high economic activity and areas of agriculture. And water shortages increase significantly in the industrial and agricultural sectors under more extreme climate scenarios. And the household sector, does not experience any shortages because it has the highest priority to meet its water demand. So there's 3 last points that I shortly want to highlight. As I said in the beginning of this video, for a more general introduction and explanation of the water allocation tool RIBASIM, you can check out the other video by my colleague Fatima Monji. Then also please visit the Stars for Water Academy webpage for further reading material of the Stars for Water project. You can think about deliverables, reports, etc. And of course, if you have questions or comments, you can always contact us through our Stars for Water website.